I bid you welcome, my children of the night. I am Pete Pardo. Welcome to the Monster's Den. Sorry, it's been a couple weeks since the last episode of this very, very fun show that I enjoy doing. But, sometimes life stuff happens and can't fit everything in, right? So, better late than never, I always say. So, today, we're going to take a look at a favorite film of mine. Get so stuck talking about music on this channel, sometimes it's hard to switch gears and do the movie thing, right? 1933, Universal Pictures, The Invisible Man. Here's the absolutely killer Blu-ray. If you don't have the kind of Universal collection, the complete collection, you need to get it. I realize you guys can't see that. Sorry. Anyway, this comes in a nice box set with all 30 some odd films from the Universal Horror Collection, or most of them anyway. All the monster films. An absolutely spectacular film. Adaptation of the H.G. Wells classic from 1897. Okay, starring none other than Claude Rains as Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man. All right, we've also got Gloria Stewart as Flora Cranley. Interestingly enough, if you didn't know this, Gloria Stewart was actually in the Titanic film. Many, 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 many years later, she was the old woman, okay, in the film, who was remembering back on the tragic events later in life. You've got Henry Travers as Dr. Cranley, her father. Henry actually also played a big part. He played Charlie. Is it Charlie? Charlie in It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, he's kind of the angel, right, that comes down. Also, you got William Harrigan as Dr. Kemp, and Una O'Connor as Jenny. Jenny is the woman who is co-owner of the Lion's Head Pub and Inn. You'll also remember her from The Bride of Frankenstein. She is always good for a little bit of comic relief with her crazy bugged out eyes and screams and all that kind of stuff. And she's just got that great voice. And she's also great to have in this particular film. So, like I said, released in 1933 from Universal on a budget of $328,000. $328,000, right? I know it's a long time ago, but man, directed by none other than James Whale, who also directed Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein, as well as Freaks and a few other films. Produced by Carl Laemmle Jr., the screenplay written by R.C. Sheriff, Philip Wiley, and Preston Sturgis, and including amazing visual effects from John Fulton, John Mescal, and Frank Williams. It needs to be stated how, at the time, state-of-the-art the special effects in The Invisible Man was. Really, really different, really kind of out of this world, and really gave a lot of impact to this story, which is essentially a science fiction story, right? Of course, Universal tried to amp up the horror elements, all right? It's crazy, too, when you watch, I've seen this movie a ton of times in my life. But before I do these shows, I always like to go rewatch them, take some notes, and just make it really, really fresh in my mind, no matter how well I know it, right? And what really surprised me last night, while watching this again for the 100th time at least, was just how much violence is in this film. Quite a bit. They really, really, I think, amped up the maniacal nature of the Jack Griffin character. Especially what you see later on in the film. So a little bit of storyline here. So, the film starts off, you see this figure walking through the snow. Okay, he's all bundled up. He's got like these kind of goggles on and bandages over his face and head and a hat, and got a little attaché case. So he walks into this place called the Lion's Head Pub and Inn during this snowstorm. He walks in, of course, you got all the locals there who are eating, drinking, talking, playing darts, all that kind of stuff. Kind of reminds you of the opening scene in American Werewolf in London, a film which was done many, many years later. And of course, he walks in, the door opens and the wind comes whipping in, the snow's coming in, and he stands there, he goes, I need a room, and everybody stops and stares at the stranger, and it's like, whoa, he does not fit into this little setting here, right? So he goes up to the owners and proprietors, which is, of course, Jenny and her husband, and, I need a room, I need a suite, all that kind of stuff. And she's like, well, it's the off season. We don't normally have rooms ready, but if you're willing to pay, I can get one ready for you. We do have one upstairs. So they go and they bring him upstairs, have him set up. He seems kind of weird because, again, he keeps talking about how he doesn't want to be disturbed and, bring me up some food. I'm going to be here for the long term and all that kind of stuff. And she's like, oh, and of course, his coat is all filled with snow and ice and wet. And she's like, oh, I can take your coat and your hat. He goes, no, that's okay. I prefer to wear it. So I'm thinking, okay, this guy's got bandages all over his head. He's wearing some strange goggles or glasses, right? He's got a hat, coat on. He doesn't want to take anything off. Okay, whatever. But I'll bring, he asked for some food. She's like, I'll go down and get you some food. Meanwhile, all the locals downstairs are talking at the bar. They're all suspicious about this strange guy who just came walking in, going up to the room. So Jenny goes and prepares a meal. She brings it up to him. He starts to eat, and he says, I do not want to be disturbed. He asks if there's a way to lock the door. There's no way to lock the door. He goes, well, please, don't disturb me. I've got very important things to do. So then, she goes downstairs. She goes back into the kitchen, and she sees one of the waitresses who helped prepare the meal forgot his mustard on the counter in the kitchen. So Jenny's like, oh, I can't believe he forgot that. He didn't want to be disturbed. Now I got to go back up there and bother him again and bring him the mustard. So she goes back upstairs, and meanwhile, the stairs lead up to the suite where he's staying, and meanwhile, you can hear. I mean, she's walking up these stairs and she's clonking. I'm thinking he obviously can hear her coming, unless he's absolutely deaf. So she goes up and she knocks on the door, and she goes in, and there he is attempting to eat his food, but he's got the bandages kind of up over his mouth, and there's like nothing there. Now I don't know. She obviously couldn't see all that much because he moved his napkin up very quick. But I'm thinking, if I was him, how did you not hear her coming? How did you not hear her knock, right? Anyway, so she brings the mustard. He goes, I told you not to disturb me. And you can see the tone of his voice, right? And it's Claude Rains. So throughout this film, until the very end of the film, you don't even see Claude's face. But you're Claude Rains, sorry. But he's got that voice. I mean, there is nobody else who could have played this role but Claude Rains. I mean, he's just had that voice that fits so well, and his tone changed throughout the film, which is really great. So, she comes down and she's like, oh my God, he must be horribly disfigured or something. He's, got all the bandages all over his head and all that kind of stuff, whatever. So then they cut back, they go to another scene, okay, which is with Flora Cranley and her father, Henry, her father, Dr. Cranley, and they're talking about, Jack Griffin, who's been missing for like over a month. He kind of disappeared, didn't give him any news where he's gone. Well, apparently the story is that Dr. Cranley has, they're working on all sorts of experiments and things like that. His two assistants, which is Dr. Kemp and Dr. Griffin, okay, Jack Griffin, and they were working on some stuff, and as it turns out, Jack was working on some secret stuff away from what the other two were doing, and experimenting on things, and apparently he came upon some kind of big discovery, and because of that he had to go leave, and he gave really no explanation as to why, but said, I will see you soon. So basically, obviously what was happening, and he's engaged to Flora, to Dr. Cranley's daughter. So basically he discovered invisibility, okay, using, he was messing around with monocaine, which is this drug, experimental drug, which bleaches and turns flesh white, and it was apparently experimented on some animals, and it did some weird things. Well, he kind of took it a step further, experimented on himself, and whammo, made himself invisible. So, of course, he's freaking out. He's like, I got to go create an antidote, but I can't do it here because nobody can see me like this. So that's kind of where it started. So he goes, leaves him a note, I'm off. So I'm invisible. I got to go off and figure out a way to, undo this and get an antidote. So, meanwhile, he's staying in the Lion's Head, right? And weeks go by. And, of course, he's got no money to pay them, so he's like weeks behind on the rent. He's up there. He's got all this equipment. So he's ordered some equipment with whatever money he had, and he's doing all these experiments. He's smashing things. He's getting pissed off and all that kind of stuff. So, Jenny goes up at some point to check on him and say, hey, you haven't paid your rent, and, why are you smashing things up in my suite and all this kind of stuff? And he's like, get out, and I want to be left alone. All of a sudden you hear the voice and the tone Rains' voice kind of start kicking up a notch. And it's when you start to realize how perfect he was for this role. And so she screamed. He kicks her out of the suite. She screams, run down the stairs. And, in typical Una O'Connor screams. If you saw her in Bride of Frankenstein, you'd know she's perfect for this. And she goes down to her husband and she's like, you've got to go get him out of here. You've got to kick him out of here. Now, if he can't pay, he's got to get out of here. He's making a mess of my suite and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, all right. So he goes up there and he goes to throw him out. So, and he's like, no, please, you need to give me more time. You need to give me more time. What I'm doing is very, very important. All this kind of stuff. He goes, no, if you can't pay, you got to go. Right. So he starts to grab his stuff to try and put it all together, get him out of here. And Jack Griffin goes berserk and he grabs him and throws him out of the room. He goes falling down the stairs, lands on his head. His wife starts screaming up a storm, calling for the police. So the police and all the people who are gathered at the bar, they're like, oh, what's going on? The crazy guy upstairs. And the police, one of the cops, led by a bunch of the people hanging out the bar, go up the stairs. They enter the suite, and he's sitting there. And he's like, you're going to have to come with me. And he goes, you don't want to do that. And he's like, oh, you're telling me? Do you know who you're talking to? The policeman is saying. And then, Jack Griffin basically says, all right, I didn't want to have to do this, but now you're going to see what you're in store for. So he starts to take off he takes off the nose and, here, have a souvenir. And he throws the plastic nose, right? He starts taking off the glasses, starts unveiling everything. He starts with the maniacal laughter. And then one of my favorite lines in the whole movie is the policeman looking at him in shock going, look, he's all eaten away. And it's just such a classic line. Because, he's taking off the bandages. There's nothing there, right? It's nothing there. So he starts laughing, of course, takes off and again, the special effects are fantastic because you see, the arms with the jacket or whatever moving around. All of a sudden, you see there's no head and everything. And they did this all with really cool special effects. They had Claude Rains, put this black tape, or black material over which, and then they kind of superimposed him out, different pieces of his body. Very, very cool for the time, special effects, all these matte effects and things like that. So he's, taking off all the stuff, and then you can't see him, right, because he's got all the clothes off, and he starts, hitting some of them, throwing things around. He goes to choke the constable, the policeman, right? So eventually he winds up leaving, and meanwhile he's laughing, the maniacal laughter and what have you. And, it's just a great scene. And then, of course, he goes on a rampage throughout the town. And one of his great lines is he's like, now you're satisfied, you fools. And he's this maniacal laughter, and it's just great, and they're like, oh, put the handcuffs on him. And he goes, how can I handcuff a bloomin' shirt? Right? Because you can't. So he bursts out of the bar, and he's running through the streets. He's knocking people over. He's topping over hats. He goes and grabs someone's bike. The bike rides itself, for a few yards. And, it's just a great scene of him just going. And then, you eventually you see the scene of him putting on a pair of pants and running up the street chasing a woman, and the pants are, running and no top, and he's singing, and it's just a great scene. So of course, where's he going to go next? Now that he can't hide out there anymore, he's got to go visit his former colleague. So he goes to Kemp's house. Okay, Kemp is sitting down after work, having a cigar, got a fire lit, and all of a sudden he hears the voice, and it's Jack's voice. So he's like, oh my God, that's you. And he's like, meanwhile, there's been these news reports of this strange invisible man back in the next town over, right? So he knows something's going on. Then he puts two and two together. He's like, oh, my friend Jack is the invisible man. So they sit down, they have a talk. Another cool scene is you see this invisible guy, you see the cigarette go up. You see the match, you see him light the cigarette, you see the smoke come out, right? Very cool special effects for the time, right? So he tells Dr. Kemp, that he's, what he's been up to, where he's been hiding out, how he's been working on an antidote, but the townspeople wouldn't leave him alone. So now, he needs help. So he wants him to partner up with him. They're going to do this together. But now is when you see a little twist to his character, because now that he's seen all the things that he can do as the Invisible Man, Sure, he still wants an antidote so he can go back and forth between being regular and being invisible, but now he's got because the drug is altering his mind, and now he's like, I have plans to rule the world, and you, Kemp, are going to help me, okay, as my partner. And Kemp is like, oh, what is going on here, right? So he says, we've got to go. Now that you're my partner, he goes, and you have to partner up with me, because if you don't, I'll kill you. Okay, so he basically kind of blackmails him, saying, you need to, I know you may or may not agree with what I'm doing, but you're going to do it anyway. It's like, I need a partner here. So he gets him to agree to go back to the village at night to get his books. So his books have all of the, information on all of his experiments, all the formulas, all that sort of thing. So they get in the car. He, of course, goes back to, takes off whatever clothes he put on so he and Kemp could talk. He takes it all off. They get in the car. They drive to that other village. They go to the Lion's Head, okay? And at the Lion's Head is all the townspeople with some of the police who were not there at the previous incident, who think that there's all this invisible man talk is fake and what have you. And they're all having a big meeting to see whether how much of a hoax this is and all that kind of stuff. So the other policemen are not really believing all this stuff, right? So they get out of the car. Jack Griffin is going to go inside the bar up to the room to get the books. He tells Kemp to go outside the window of the suite, and he's going to throw the books down to him. So he goes in, obviously goes by unseen. Everybody who's in there, the 30 people who are in there gathering, whatever, having this big powwow, goes up the stairs, finds the books, because the suite is still in absolute disarray. Okay, and the books are all over the floor. He grabs the books, throws them down to Kemp. But then, of course, he can't leave quietly, so he goes down and, of course, makes his presence known, starts throwing things at people, and actually goes and kills the head chief of police, chokes him, and then takes like the table, small table, and bashes his head in. So again, this is 1933. This is pretty insane violence for back then in a film, right? And there's going to see more of this in this film. So now he's just absolutely, out of his mind. So he gets back, meets Kemp at the car. They go back to the house, all right? And then he goes and, he's talking to Kemp, and even my wife is watching this with me, and he's just rattling off one order after another, all this stuff that he and Kemp are going to do. He's basically, Kemp, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And I'm thinking, like, man, bossy, isn't he? In his rage, right? As he gives Kemp all the different rules and what have you. So now the police are finally like, okay, this Invisible Man character is real. We've got a dead policeman, all sorts of people hurt, all this destruction, whatever. So now the manhunt begins. So they get together all the police forces from around the area. Townspeople are getting involved. The manhunt begins. Okay. But of course, Kemp is absolutely beside himself, and he's like, oh, I got to get away from this guy. I got to figure this out, right? This is not going to end well. So he gets up in the middle of the night. So they get back, and Griffin is all, oh, we did good. We got my books. Tomorrow we're going to be in the experiments, on the antidote. So he goes to sleep. In the middle of the night, Kemp gets up and he goes down to the telephone in his study, and he goes to call Dr. and Flora, okay, Dr. Cranley, and he tells him what's going on. And Dr. Cranley tells him, okay, well, we can't do anything in the middle of the night. I'm going to come in the morning, and we're going to talk to him, and we're going to figure this all out, but don't do anything right now. So, but of course, while he's on the phone, Flora, his daughter, comes down and hears. And meanwhile, she is grieving that she hasn't seen her fiance in, all this time. So she comes down, and she makes him tell her what's going on. She's like, I have to go to him. I have to go to him. So, no, you can't go. I have to go to him. But, meanwhile, Kemp told Dr. Cranley, he said, but we need to call the police. And he said, don't call the police. But he didn't listen. So as soon as he gets off the phone with Dr. Cranley, he calls the police, tells them he's got the Invisible Man in his house. He's sleeping. Here's where I live. So the police are on their way, and their plan is to surround the house, right? So, of course, it doesn't end well, right? So Dr. Cranley and Flora show up, and Flora goes to talk to Jack. And he, of course, melts at the sight of her presence because he hasn't seen her in a while. And all of a sudden, he sounds kind of normal. But then as he starts to talk about what he's doing in his plan, she can kind of sense that something is really wrong, right? But then all of a sudden, he hears things outside. So he realizes that Kemp called the police, and the police are surrounding the house. So he goes and he confronts Kemp, and he says, I can't believe you stabbed me in the back like this. You did this to me. He goes, for your betrayal, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to come back tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and I'm going to kill you. That's my promise to you. and then he starts saying all this stuff. It's just fantastic. Claude Rains. I mean, he's like, I have the power to rule, to make the world grovel at my feet. Even the moon is frightened of me. These great lines, because he's saturated with the thirst for power. Just fantastic stuff. So the police surround the house. He, of course, escapes, right? And as he leaves, says, "Kemp, I'm getting you tomorrow at 10 o'clock," right? So, and again, I hinted at it before. I actually a little bit too early in this in the film, but the scene of him, putting on a pair of trousers and running down the street and singing and chasing after a woman, it's classic stuff. So now he goes on like this binge of destruction over the next day or two. So he goes out. Remember the town and all the police are out searching for the manhunt. So he sees a bunch of people like on a cliff somewhere looking at all sorts of stuff, and he goes and he grabs them. He's invisible, throws them off the cliff to their death. Right? He gets onto there's a train coming down. He goes and derails the train. Train crashes off with a crew full of people. So it's like, this is like serious stuff. Again, for 1933. By this time, he's out of his mind. He goes to a bank. He robs a bank. He takes all the money, throws it out in the street, laughing and singing, all this kind of stuff. And then, of course, one of the great cameo appearances in this film is, there's a big meeting between the police and the town leaders and the reporters and, the journalist. And, of course, one of the reporters who's there asking a question about the Invisible Man is none other than Dwight Fry, played, of course, Renfield and Fritz in both Dracula and Frankenstein. Good to see him even for only like 30 seconds. So, eventually the plan is that, Kemp, of course, is freaking out. So they said the plan is we're going to take you out of your home as a police escort. We're going to go back to police headquarters. We're going to dress you up as a policeman, and then we're going to get you out of there, and you're going to hop in your car, and you're going to take off and go drive far, far away. But of course, they think that Mr. Jack Griffin is stupid and he's not probably there listening to them. So of course, he follows them, foils the plan. He winds up getting in. He's already in the car, in Dr. Kemp's car. So he's driving out in the middle of nowhere, and then all of a sudden, behind him, he starts hearing Jack's voice. And so, what does he do? He, of course, pulls him out, ties him up. All right. Around the neck, around the back, whatever. He pulls him around, throws him back in the car, drives the car over to like a steep incline over a cliff, and basically drives him off the cliff to his death. So Dr. Kemp is now gone as well. So the death count is like really, really high at this point in time. Then, of course, he's exhausted by this point. So he finds this little barn with lots of hay in it, and to go sleep. And while he does that, it starts to snow out. So in the middle of the night, the owner of the barn, goes into the barn for whatever reason, we don't know, and starts rustling around, and he notices that there's movement in the hay, but there's nothing there. So he's like, oh crap, this Invisible Man is probably in my barn. So he sneaks back out, and he goes into town, and he alerts the police. So the police come in full force, and they figure, the police aren't stupid either, but they figure that the snow is going to help us here. Because even though he's invisible, he's still a man, he still has weight, and he's going to show his tracks, or the snow will settle on him. So they basically they surround the barn, they start to light a fire around the barn. He wakes up, he comes out. As he runs out, of course, you can see his footprints, and they just start shooting, and boom, you can actually see. It's really cool, the special effects, how you can see the footprints in the snow, all right, but there's no figure there. And then when he falls over after getting shot, you see the depression in the snow, which is very, very cool. Again, very ahead of its time. Okay. The next scene, back at the hospital, he's not dead yet, but he's still invisible. They were able to move him. He's in a bed, invisible. He's talking. He's asking for Flora. And then Flora and Dr. Cranley go. And he basically says his last words to her. And then he dies. And as he dies, all of a sudden you see the skull appear, and then his face. And boom, there you have Claude Rains for the first time on camera. Full face, right? You only just heard his voice and saw him underneath the bandages for the whole movie. But there he is. And that's the end of the film, right? So a great ending to a movie that, there have been a lot of Invisible Men films. So this actually spawned two Universal sequels in 1940 and 1944, plus a multitude of other Invisible Men films. But, basically you had The Invisible Man Returns in 1940, so 7 years later. Took them a while. You had the Invisible Woman in 1940, also not really related. So The Invisible Man Returns and The Invisible Man's Revenge in 1944 were the kind of direct sequels, and you had Vincent Price in one of them, of course. You had Invisible Agent in 1942, again, not a real sequel, but it used invisibility. And then, of course, who can forget Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man in 1951. A very cool film, and he also appeared in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein at the very end, okay, with Vincent Price as the voice of the Invisible Man in the last section of the film. And we've seen lots of other remakes in recent years. There's an Invisible Man film that's out not out in the theaters right now because we're all in pandemic lockdown, but you can catch it on pay-per-view. I've heard it's very good. I have not seen it yet. There have been other Invisible Men films or Invisible Being films over time. So this movie spawned a long line of invisible creations over time. A very, very good film. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to say about it other than it's great. I will tell you that if you get the complete Legacy Collection by Universal on Blu-ray, it looks exceptional for a film. I've had so many versions of The Invisible Man over the years. I've had it on VHS. I've seen it obviously on television a million times, like when I was growing up, and I've had it on DVD. And this is the second Blu-ray version I've had. And I will say, for a film as old as it is, it looks pretty damn good. Really good. And the special effects, yes, they're dated because it's 1933. But if you put yourself back into, the mindset of that was 1933, and to see this, guy running around with just like a pajama top or, with just the trousers, the footprints. I mean, all the stuff is just mind-boggling to think of how they did that way back when filmmaking was in such its infancy. So a great film. Again, got to hand it off to Claude Rains, who surprised he didn't appear in more of these Universal horror films. We wouldn't see him again until The Wolfman, quite a few years later. Right? That would start like the 1940s horror films for Universal. But I think that he was the perfect guy for this role. Absolutely the perfect guy for this role. So a great film. Check it out if you haven't, or if you have, maybe this will kind of help you revisit it and make you want to go watch it again. So this is Pete Pardo for The Monsters Den. Thanks for joining. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. We got lots of great stuff, more music stuff coming this week. Hopefully we'll get to another Monsters Den this weekend. All right, and until then, stay tuned and make sure you go check out our playlist if you want to see all the other Monsters Den episodes. There's a handful of them we've done so far. There's more to come. So check out the playlist for Monsters Den, and we'll see you guys real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.